Well, in the recent US election, there were a number of state-specific ballots regarding abortion, cannabis, and euthanasia. So like mini referendums within the individual state. Let's have a look at the results, because if you listen to the media, you would think that all these ballots, all these referendums would have succeeded with massive majorities. They're pro-drugs, they're pro-euthanasia, they're pro-abortion. Well, guess what? They didn't. They didn't all succeed. Let's check it out. So firstly, let's check out euthanasia. There was one ballot. The state of West Virginia passed a constitutional amendment banning assisted suicide in that state. Yes, banning it. What's significant is that there have been previous failures to legalise assisted suicide in some deep democratic states that you would think maybe would favour it, like Maryland, New York, Connecticut and Delaware. Now, this is a great sign, especially given the rapid expansion of euthanasia in Canada to now include killing people with dementia. Currently, euthanasia is allowed in only 10 states and in Washington, D.C. On the topic of abortion, in 10 states, referendums asked voters whether they supported amending their state constitutions to establish a right to abortion, to overcome the whole Roe v. Wade aspect, the overturning of that. Now, according to a report in the Christian Post, it said this: since the US Supreme Court's 2022 decision in Dobbs versus Jackson, which found that the US Constitution does not guarantee a right to abortion, several states have enacted pro-life protections, restricting abortion to the earliest week of pregnancy or instituting near-total bans. Good. In response, some states held referendums in 2022, 2023, asking voters if they wanted to establish a right to abortion in their state constitutions. The referendums passed in all 4 states, ranging from deep blue states of California and Vermont to the swing state of Michigan and the red state of Ohio. Now, this year, voters in 9 states weighed in on similar measures. It was Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, and South Dakota. And voters in a 10th state, New York, decided the fate of a equal rights amendment, not equal rights for the unborn child, of course, that would amend the state constitution to add the right to gender identity, gender expression, pregnancy outcomes, and reproductive health care, aka abortion and autonomy, to a list of characteristics passed under state law. So what were the results? Well, in Florida, unlike other states with such a measure on the ballot, Amendment 4 needed to secure the support of 60% of voters. It fell short of that amount, only got 57%, marking the first time since Roe v. Wade was overturned that a referendum to establish a state constitutional right to abortion failed. With the failure of Amendment 4, Florida's 6-week abortion ban will remain in effect. Okay, you go Florida. Now, according to a report by firstthings.com, it says the pro-life movement was dramatically outspent in these battles, yet won nevertheless. According to Ballotpedia, pro-abortionists spent $118 million in Florida to promote abortion, but they still lost. Countless lives will be saved because of these 3 outcomes, and these states, along with others that significantly protect prenatal justice, will be able to demonstrate in the coming years that there is nothing inconsistent with restricting abortion and having positive health outcomes for women. Now, you'll note it said 3 states. Well, the other 2 states were Nebraska and South Dakota. They also rejected their pro-abortion ballot measure. In fact, in Nebraska, it was interesting because they had 2 ballots. There was one that was for abortion and another to prohibit abortion after the first trimester. Yeah, just first trimester, 13 weeks. But the prohibition of abortion got 55% support, but the pro-abortion one, the free-for-all, only got 51%. So the pro-life one actually won. And South Dakota's right to abortion failed by nearly a 2-to-1 margin. Now, Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America President Marjorie Dannenfelser responded by saying, "We celebrate the lives that will be saved with the defeat of pro-abortion ballot measures in Florida, Nebraska and South Dakota. The pro-life states of Florida, Nebraska and South Dakota have disrupted abortion activists' track record, showing the path forward is to fight for life, following the examples of Governor Ron DeSantis, and 2 other politicians. When Republican leaders engage, extreme abortion ballot measures fail because they are exposed for what they are and fear-mongering lies are refuted. Republicans must be as devoted as Governor Ron DeSantis from Florida to explain how these measures allow abortion until birth and take away parental rights." Now, however, the news wasn't good for the other 7 states. The amendment in New York doesn't specifically mention abortion, but it prohibits discrimination based on pregnancy outcomes and reproductive health care and autonomy. So woke. But New York is already a haven for abortion, which is accessible through all 9 months of pregnancy. Now, Christian Post wrote, while Colorado, Maryland, Montana and Nevada already had few no pro-life protections prior to the passage of the pro-abortion amendments, abortion policy will change dramatically in Arizona and Missouri as a result of Tuesday's vote. Arizona will see its 15-week abortion ban reversed, while Missouri's near-total abortion ban will experience a similar fate. But here's the bit, there's a lot of states I've mentioned. Let me clarify that. I'll show you a graph in a minute. But here's the bit that fascinated me. Many of the ballots would guarantee a right to abortion, but only until fetal viability, and would only allow it later for the health of the pregnant woman to protect their life. Now, that is far more conservative than New Zealand's law, which allows for abortion to full term, 40 weeks. In New Zealand law, the only restriction on late-term abortions is that you need the approval of not 1 abortionist, but 2. Yep, that's what the law says. The media and the pro-abortion politicians won't admit that, but that's the effect of the new expansive law that Mother Jacinda Ardern champions through Parliament as part of her shameful legacy. For example, Missouri voted to enshrine the right to an abortion up to the point of viability. That's around 22 to 23 weeks. It's still far too late and still very wrong, but it's more conservative than New Zealand's extreme law. Nevada and Montana also talked about viability. On the other hand, Colorado and Maryland are very similar to New Zealand's extremist law. So, look, a lot of states I've mentioned. Here's a summary. Blue is where the right to abortion has been voted for. Purple is where abortion was rejected. Good. Green is where a pro-life measure was voted for. Good. And orange is Nevada. Now, abortion was voted for this year, this election just gone, but there has to be another vote in 2026 to ratify it. Now, the commentary from First Things concludes a fire hose of, a fire hose of abortion disinformation has doused the American people since Roe v. Wade was overturned, spurred by huge money, corrupt media, feckless politicians, and compromised medical and academic communities that don't permit meaningful dissent. Wow, that sounds familiar. The result of this has been, let's face it, a massive cultural shifting. Marvel. But on the other hand, an entire campaign that tried to build itself around this pro-abortion energy failed spectacularly. Kamala Harris's campaign. The population cannot be more misinformed about abortion than it is right now. And still, about 4 in 10 Americans identify as pro-life. Trump has outsourced the future of MAGA to J.D. Vance, a man who, despite some disappointing compromises during the 2024 campaign, is deeply pro-life and supportive of social programs for women and families. Now, the author, who is Professor of Medical Humanities at the Creighton University School of Medicine, concludes, "We must not backtrack in the slightest when it comes to lifting up the reality of the vulnerable prenatal child. Our pro-abortion opponents have worked hard and smart to erase her reality from the national conversation. They have shown us no quarter in mounting such attacks and again have been largely successful. Our public discourse on abortion is almost totally disconnected from what abortion actually is. With that in mind, we must reteach the culture in part by prudently, respectfully, but unapologetically employing victim imagery. We must subvert our throwaway culture's attempt to hide the reality of abortion. Great statement. Okay, and then cannabis. Well, don't tell the Drug Foundation, the Green Party or the media, but voters are increasingly waking up to the negative effects of legalising dope. Now, prior to this election, 24 states have legalised recreational marijuana in the US. Ohio was the most recent last November. Now, according to a report from our colleagues in the US, which is SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, they say this: November the 5th, 2024 marked an historic night, that's last week, the election, for the movement to oppose the legalisation and commercialisation of mind-altering substances. In the 4 states that voted on recreational drug use, all 4 rejected the industry-backed proposals, favouring policies that prioritise public health and safety. In Florida, voters defeated Amendment 3, which would have legalised recreational marijuana in the Sunshine State. This is especially notable given that the marijuana industry spent more than $150 million in support of legalisation. Wow, that sounds like New Zealand and the stacked odds that we had against us. But even though in Florida 56% voted for legalisation, the threshold is 60%, so it failed. Now, voters in North Dakota and South Dakota both rejected legalising dope. For both states, it was the 3rd time they'd had this vote, yet the pro-drug side still can't win. Nebraska did approve medicinal marijuana, but yep, that's not recreational use, although we know where it's heading. And Massachusetts, where cannabis is already legal, looked to legalise psychedelics. Now, question 4, which would have decriminalised the possession of psychedelic substances and legalised their supposed therapeutic use, had 57% of voters reject the proposition. Great. If they had succeeded, Massachusetts would have become the 3rd state to legalise psychedelic mushrooms after Oregon and Colorado. By the way, euthanasia is legal in both Oregon and Colorado, as is recreational cannabis. Wow, those are both 2 good states to avoid. Now, you may be asking yourself, what's all this about psychedelic mushrooms? Well, let me read you a short piece from Luke Niferados from SAM, which sums it up very well. And he says, now the profit-driven industry is thinking even bigger, pushing to legalise psychedelics, including magic mushrooms and stronger drugs. To do it, the industry has again opened the old playbook to advance the notion that these drugs are actually therapeutic. Its business model built around the normalisation of more people using more drugs at higher doses to fuel greater profits. For drug legalisers, it has never been about science or the data or how many people are harmed. It's always about the money. Psychedelics include LSD, ecstasy, psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms, PCP, and others that cause a person to hallucinate and feel an extreme sense of euphoria. Use of psychedelics alters the brain and perceptions of reality. It can result in significant psychological, emotional, and physical damage, particularly for young people, those with mental health issues, and people struggling with substance abuse disorders. Recent research on psychedelics showed a connection to cases of manic behaviour. Other dangerous side effects include seizures, heart attacks, high blood pressure, and comas. Following the legalisation of marijuana in 2014, Oregon passed a measure in 2020 which decriminalised the possession of all drugs, including fentanyl, heroin, meth, and cocaine. Advocates claimed it would get more people into treatment. The policy experiment has been a resounding failure. Less than 1% of individuals have entered treatment, and opioid deaths in Oregon have continued to increase, outpacing the national average. In Colorado, the first state to legalize marijuana, Proposition 122 was funded by the industry to commercialize psychedelics, including psilocybin, DMT, mescaline, and ibogaine, I think is how you say those. In California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, Nevada, and Massachusetts, there are efforts now underway to legalize psychedelics and increase their use, all following the legalization of marijuana. It should be no surprise that the playbook for psychedelics follows that used for marijuana. The same corporate and marketing executives who told us marijuana was medicine are now heralding psychedelics as the next best thing. But none of these are wonder drugs. None will provide tax revenue to close budget gaps. None will make communities safer or give our youth a greater chance to succeed. But by the way, the campaign has been going on in New Zealand for a while. Let me show you. This is One News. Here's some stories. These extreme drugs can apparently break meth addictions, help depression, and even stop alcoholism. Wow, a miracle drug. I mean, can it help people parallel park at shopping centres as well? The New Zealand Herald has been campaigning as well, reckons it can treat addiction and mental health issues, that we need greater awareness and understanding for those using them medicinally. And the New Zealand Druggie Foundation there says it is shocking that an illegal drug is resulting in people being charged because it's illegal. I know, shocking. And now remember, we're referring to drugs such as LSD and ecstasy. We're not talking about a toasted mushroom sandwich. But there's the update on the ballots. Some positive, some negative, but nowhere near as a walkover as they were predicting. Oh, one other. California. Guess what? They've had a guts full of liberal, offender-friendly, wet bus ticket punishments for people who commit crimes. How surprising. Now, according to AP News, it reported this. Frustrated with what they see as rampant retail crimes, voters approved an initiative making shoplifting a felony for repeat offenders, so in other words, giving them a conviction, again, and increasing penalties for some drug charges, including those involving the synthetic opioid fentanyl. The tough on crime ballot measure also gives judges the authority to order people with multiple drug charges to get treatment. Great idea. The measure partly rolls back a progressive law passed by voters in 2014 that downgraded several non-violent crimes to misdemeanors, including if you steal something under $950 in value, and some drug offences. The reversal reflects widespread anger amongst voters who are increasingly pinning the blame for homelessness and retail theft on criminal justice reform and progressive district attorneys. Tough on crime. Wow, what a great idea. The social experiment of liberalism is dying, and not before its time. So there we have it. Euthanasia, abortion, drugs, including magic mushroom, and crime. It's not a perfect outcome by far, but Americans, it looks like, are slowly but surely waking up to liberal policies which harm families and communities. But not voting for Kamala and not voting for her key policy of abortion was probably the very best outcome possible.